So, who gets to be successful and why? I mean, it's a question we all think about, right? For decades, we've been told this story that it's all about willpower, having the right mindset, and just practicing harder than everyone else. But what if that whole story is wrong? What if the game is rigged right from the very start? Let's get into it.
It really all kicks off with this incredibly famous experiment. Just picture it. A researcher, a friendly chat with a little kid, everything super relaxed. But then, right before the researcher steps out of the room, they make the kid a really interesting offer. So the researcher puts a single marshmallow down in front of the kid, and they say, look, you can eat this one right now. But if you can just wait for me to come back and this marshmallow is still here, I'll give you two. Seems like a simple test of patience, yeah? Well, get this. Researchers followed these kids for the next 50 years, and the results were just staggering. The kids who waited, they had higher test scores, they got into better careers, had more stable relationships. I mean, they even had better teeth.
This one test became the absolute bedrock for how we think about success today. But what if the whole thing was built on a massive misunderstanding?
Yeah, so based on experiments just like that marshmallow test, we've pretty much built our entire philosophy of education around three big ideas. You could call these the three pillars of how we think you get ahead in life.
Okay, so first up, of course, is delayed gratification. This is the big takeaway from the marshmallow test. It's the idea that real success comes from sacrificing a little bit today for a much better tomorrow. Do your homework now so you can play video games later. It's a really simple, powerful concept. And honestly, on the surface, it feels completely true. Next, you've got the growth mindset. This theory says that your talents aren't set in stone, so instead of seeing failure as, the end of the world, successful people see it as just data, a chance to figure out what went wrong so you can come back even stronger. It's all about resilience.
And the third pillar is something called deliberate practice. The thinking here is that just working hard isn't enough. You've got to work smart. This means you have to be brutally honest with yourself, find your own weaknesses, and then make a strategic plan to fix them. It's basically the exact opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where someone is so bad at something, they don't even realize how bad they are.
So there you have it. Self-control, resilience, and self-assessment. Seems like a pretty solid recipe for success, doesn't it? But here's the thing. There is a massive, fundamental flaw in this whole line of thinking, and once you see it, it changes absolutely everything.
I mean, think about it. We've spent years and millions of dollars creating school programs to teach kids these exact traits. If the theories are right, we should be creating a whole generation of super achievers. So the big question is, has it worked?
Well, the results are in, and they're pretty clear. Nope, it hasn't worked. When researchers actually try to teach these success skills to kids who are struggling, their performance doesn't really get any better. And the reason why points to one of the most important ideas in all of science.
The crucial mistake here is confusing correlation with causation. Just because two things tend to happen together, it doesn't mean one caused the other. It's like this. A lot of super successful CEOs get up at 4 in the morning. But does waking up at 4 a.m. make you successful? Of course not. The truth is the complete opposite. It's being successful that gives you the motivation and the resilience in the first place. These traits aren't the cause of success, they're the result.
So if it's not our personal traits, then what is the single biggest predictor of success? Well, huge, large-scale studies all point to one thing, over and over again: the wealth of your parents. And the key difference seems to come down to parenting styles, which, it turns out, are shaped by the family's day-to-day economic reality. Okay, so this table breaks down the main differences. Wealthier parents, they tend to use more complex language, have longer, more explanatory and friendly conversations. On the flip side, parents who are under constant financial stress often have to rely on simple, direct commands. But maybe the most important difference is the environment. Wealthier parents can usually provide a really stable and predictable world where promises are kept. For poorer families, life is just way more volatile, and that makes it a lot harder to keep those promises. So, if we take this new understanding that our environment is key, and we go back and look at those three myths of success, well, suddenly they look completely different. Let's start with that famous marshmallow. Was that test really about a kid's self-control, or was it actually measuring something else entirely? See, it turns out it wasn't a test of self-control, it was a test of trust. If you're a kid from a stable home where adults have always kept their promises, waiting for that second marshmallow is a totally rational bet. But if you come from a chaotic world where promises are broken all the time, the most logical thing in the world is to eat that marshmallow right now before it disappears. And what about resilience? That growth mindset? Well, it's pretty easy to try again after you fail when you believe there's a safety net to catch you. If you know deep down that your parents or your community are going to help you get back on your feet, taking risks is no big deal. But without that safety net, failure isn't some great learning opportunity, it's a catastrophe.
And finally, deliberate practice. Being able to self-assess and reflect requires mental space. That's a luxury that's really hard to find when you're living in a high-stress world where all your brain power is focused on just getting through the day.
So why? Why do these different parenting styles even exist? Is it because rich parents are just better? No, not at all. They are perfectly rational responses to the world around them. Parents are teaching their kids the rules to the game they will most likely have to play as adults.
You have to understand, there are essentially two completely different games being played. For the poor, the world is often a strict hierarchy, where your survival depends on obeying authority without asking questions, a skill that gets taught through authoritarian parenting. But for the rich, the world is more like a system that you can navigate, a system you can maximize through negotiation and debate, skills that are encouraged by that more explanatory style of parenting.
This quote just nails it. The incentive is not for your child to succeed, it's for your child to fit into the social environment. So these parenting strategies are really about survival and fitting in with your specific social class, which helps explain why these social structures are so incredibly difficult to change.
Okay, so this whole thing paints a picture of a really stable, self-perpetuating system, doesn't it? Which brings up a pretty obvious question. If that's true, why does society ever change? Why do revolutions happen?
Well, historically speaking, major instability doesn't start from the bottom of society. It actually starts at the top. The trigger is this fascinating phenomenon called elite overproduction. Basically, when you teach a whole generation of wealthy kids that their goal is always to maximize and win, you eventually create way more ambitious elites than there are powerful jobs for them to fill. And the result of that is intense, brutal infighting among the rich.
And this conflict almost always unfolds in a really predictable pattern. First, a faction of the elites, the ones who are losing the power struggle at the top, they start looking for allies. And they find them in the masses, who are usually suffering from the same timeless problems, crushing debt, losing their land, and basically living in servitude. So the disgruntled elites make a powerful promise. Follow us, and we will cancel your debts, give you back your land, and end your servitude. And that is the spark of revolution. That's the game reset.
And this all leaves us with a pretty fascinating and honestly kind of unsettling final thought. If a society rigs the game so badly that moving up the ladder becomes basically impossible, is a violent game reset not just a possibility, but an inevitable recurring pattern that we see throughout all of human history?